Hey guys, it's me today. I'm here with my September wrap up. I'm a bit late. I know I promised that this video would come on Sunday. It's Monday, but I was doing really sick and I still am, but it's a little bit better than yesterday and the day before, so I just haven't really been able to like gather the energy to film, but I'm here now and we're doing this. September was Becca's Bookathon, which is a month-long readathon hosted by Becca in the Books. I'll have her channel and all my reading vlogs for it linked in the description, so you can go check those out to know more about the readathon, because that's not what I'm going to be talking about in this wrap up. I also did a mid-month wrap up, which will also be linked down below, but let's start off with the stats because I read a lot this month. I read 13 books in total, which means that book-wise it's my second best reading month of the year. I also read 5,198 pages, which amounts to 173.27 pages per day and 299.85 pages per book. I read 4 books that I physically own and 9 galleys I got through NetGalley. And then for star rating, we're a bit all over the place. I have 3 2 stars, 4 3 stars, 5 4 stars, and 1 5-star book, which amounts to an average rating of 3.3. And then for age range, I had 5 young adult books and 8 adult books, which is continuing the trend of the past couple of months, where I've just been reading way more adult than young adult. And for genres, I read 6 contemporaries, 2 fantasies, 1 sci-fi, 3 historical fiction, and 1 mystery thriller. So then quickly going over the books that I already talked about in my mid-month wrap-up. The first book I read is The Dishonored Viscount by Sophie Barnes, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars to, and is a galley I got from NetGalley. Then I read The Spot of Trouble by Terry Wilson, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars, and is another galley I got from NetGalley. Then I read Sadie by Courtney Summers, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read You'd Be Home Now by Kathleen Glasgow, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars, and is another galley I got from NetGalley. Then I read Rule of Wolves by Lee Bardugo, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars. And then I read What Once Was Mine by Liz Braswell, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and is on a galley got from NetGalley. Those are all the ones from my mid-month wrap-up. Again, it's linked down below if you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts about those books. So then, going into the books that I haven't talked about yet in a wrap-up setting, like I said, did those vlogs, talked about them there. But when it comes to a wrap-up, I haven't talked about these. The first one that I have for you today is The Meeting Point by Olivia Lara, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and is another galley I got from NetGalley. This book, this is an adult romance novel about this woman who has been in a long-term relationship, and that relationship is just kind of like in a rut. It's not as great as it used to be, and it's like the weekend of her birthday, and her boyfriend is like away for work, and she decides to go surprise him. But she arrives there and is like calling him like, hey, I'm here, and he's like not picking up. And then finally someone picks up, and it's a Lyft driver, and it turns out her boyfriend like left his phone accidentally in his Lyft, and the Lyft driver is like, hey, you're probably the blonde I saw him with that he was like all over, I'll return the phone to you real quick now. And she's like, no, I don't have blonde hair, I literally just arrived here, haven't seen him, I don't know what you're talking about. Turns out that her boyfriend has been cheating on her. Now she feels terrible, and the Lyft driver also feels terrible for like giving her this piece of information on her birthday and basically ruining her birthday weekend. And he's like, hey, I know this small town, it isn't that far away, how about you go there and I text you these things to do in the small town so you can still have a great birthday. And that's the setup of this book. I had a fantastic time with this book. I read this in like basically one sitting. I just absolutely flew through it. I think the romance in this was really cute. I really loved it. I felt the chemistry, and they had like so many great moments together, and I really liked how this goes in a direction that I wasn't necessarily expecting like going into this book, but I really loved that. And I really liked that it took that direction. This is also mainly set in a small town, which I really love small town settings. I think that's like a cliche thing to love in books, but I do, and it was done really well in this book. I really like all of the side characters, and it all just brought this to life very well. And like I said, this was a very addicting read. I'm so good to it. I really liked our 2 main characters, and yeah, just when I finished it, I just started like thinking about it more, and I did have some small issues with it. Like there are some storylines that are like introduced but never really wrapped up properly, and I just wish like those ties were just, you know, it was just better tied up, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying. I also just feel like the ending itself was very abrupt. I feel like with just like 5 pages more or something, it would feel a little bit more natural. The next book I read is Virgin Zero by David Yoon. This is a adult sci-fi thriller-esque, officially it's called a thriller, but until like the very end it isn't like very thrilling, so I wouldn't necessarily call it a thriller. But this one follows Max, who works at this huge social media company, and one day he finds out these plans for this social media company, what they wanted to do in the future, and he isn't supposed to find out, so he gets fired because they know he found out, and he ends up starting this group with his two best friends that's called Virgin Zero, and they are kind of wanting to take down the bad social media practices that are currently going on. And yeah, I picked this up because I absolutely adore David Yoon's young adult contemporaries, and I love sci-fi, so I was expecting to also really like this, and I didn't. I don't know if I said that, but I give it 2 out of 5 stars. I just didn't like this. It didn't work for me, and it's a shame because, like I said, I love David Yoon's other novels, and my main problem with this book was the writing, which seems to irk me the most because I know I love this author's writing, but just in this book, I don't know what he did differently, but I hated it. I didn't connect to it. It's also, it takes place in 2018, and it's like written like it's like someone from the future like recounting these stories, and I just didn't really like that element to it. I just thought it caused a lot of like cringy lines where it's like explaining like slang from 2018, but like we still use those words, so it feels weird that he's like explaining those things like it's the most foreign concept in the world. I didn't connect to any of these characters. I thought they were very bland. I don't think they necessarily went through a lot of development. Like, they're still at the same point at the beginning as in the end, like as humans, and I just feel like I want development of my characters. I want to connect to the characters. I didn't have that with this book at all. I didn't care for anything that was happening in this book, which I think is mainly because of my disconnect with the writing. That just caused me to also like not really care for what was happening. I also just was bored throughout several sections throughout this book. Like, this took me ages to read, and it's not that long. The next book that I read is Cheers to the Duke by Sally MacKenzie, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and is a gal I got from NetGalley. This one follows this woman who like runs this house for women who like were abandoned and their children, like their daughters, so like widowers or like spinsters, or just women who got pregnant and then the guy was like, I'm out. It's a historical romance, by the way. So she runs this home to like take care of these women and their daughters, and she's kind of a little bit overworking herself in this place, and her best friend is having a like christening for a baby. She's the godmother to this baby, but she doesn't want to go because she's very busy in his house and doesn't want to let it go. So the women in his house kind of like set it up so she has to go, kind of like trick her into going a little bit. And there she meets the Duke, who was like very well hidden in the family tree and wasn't supposed to ever come close to being a Duke, but like through circumstances he ends up being a Duke. And he has a son. His wife passed away during childbirth, and now that he like has this title, he feels like he has to remarry again, and everyone like in the society is like younger than him, like don't really care about the fact that he has a son, so he just like doesn't really connect with anyone. And he also goes to this christening and meets up with the female main character, and he is like the main like provider for this home. So they have been talking over letters throughout the year, like the past year, to just kind of like update on what's going on, you know. I really like these two main characters. The main thing I liked about them is that they were both like had been in a relationship before and have had this like life before, and are a bit older than you typically see in historical romance, at least the ones I've read, and I've not read many, and I thought that was very interesting. And then the Duke, also his son, is like I believe 10 years old, and I thought he was a very great addition to the book. I really liked how he kind of caused the two main characters to like connect with each other a bit more. I thought it was a lot of fun. My main problem with this book is just that besides the romance, there's just like nothing going on in this book. I just wanted a little bit more to it, and I also just feel like it was very installed in a way. Like, yes, they've been communicating with each other for over a year, but I just feel like this christening, like the party's like 2 weeks, and we get like the first couple of days of those 2 weeks, and then where they like spend time together and like are falling for each other, and then all of a sudden we skip to the end of those 2 weeks. And I'm just like, you could have spread those events over the 2 weeks a little bit better, and then it felt more natural, I guess, but this just felt a little bit rushed. Then the next book I read is Zainab Takes New York by Ayesha Harruna Attah. I don't know if I pronounced any of that correctly, and I apologize sincerely, but I gave this 2 out of 5 stars, and it's another guy I got from NetGalley. This one is hard to explain because it has no plot. This one follows Zainab, who moves to New York from Ghana because she wants to become an illustrator, so she goes to college to be an illustrator in New York. That was terribly explained. And now that she is kind of like living on her own, she wants to discover herself more, fall in love for the first time, and you know, just live life. But she gets like these voices in her head that are the voices of her ancestors, and they're kind of like giving her advice, commentating on what she's doing. And yeah, I didn't like this. This again was a book that was very boring to me, and I had a difficult time getting through, even though it's a pretty short book. I just didn't have a good time reading this at all. It was very boring. Zainab was a very immature character, and she's a year older than I am, so for me to think that she's extremely immature just, you know, feels wrong. I feel like nothing happens in this book. Like, literally there's no plot to this book. We just go from event to event, and I just wasn't a fan of it. I think all of the characters are very flat, no real development. This was also pitched as a rom-com. The romances in it is terribly done. Generally didn't feel any ounce of chemistry between the characters, and there was nothing funny happening in this book. The only thing that really interested me in this book is the voices of the ancestors, but I feel like eventually we went nowhere with that. Let's move on. Then the next book I read is Of Princes and Promises by Sandhya Menon. This is the second book in the St. Rosetta's Academy, which is a companion series of like romance, YA romance books set in this boarding school and are based off of fairy tales. This one is based off of The Princess and the Frog, and it follows Katrina Laval, who is like the queen bee of the school. And in the last book she got dumped, and ever since then she's kind of been knocked off her throne a little bit. And at the beginning of this book, her ex comes up to her and, hey, this big event that's happening, I'm going with a supermodel, just to like rub it in your face that I'm doing better than you. And she's like, you know what, I'm not taking that. I want to keep my queen bee status. I'm not gonna be dragged too much, so I am gonna like, she lies and says that she also has like a really hot date, but she doesn't. So she ends up calling in the help of Rahul Chopra, who is a guy with very bad social anxiety, and he's never really fit in anywhere. He has trouble fitting in with his friends, and she decides to take Rahul, and it's like, I'm gonna give you a makeover, like teach you a bit about how to be social, and you're gonna be like the hot date that nobody knows, except like, you know, people know Rahul and nobody can know that's him, so they put on this pseudonym called RC, and under this pseudonym Rahul gets like very confident and a bit of a dick, and you know, some conflict arises there as his friends also start to notice his change in attitudes. And yeah, I thought this was a great romance. I love Sandhya Menon's books. As you might know, I've done a whole video on her books, and I genuinely had a fantastic time reading this book. I thought Katrina and Rahul's romance was amazing. I really liked the development both of the characters went through, and like, Rahul was my favorite character in the first book, so I literally screamed when I found out that this one was going to be about him, and he didn't disappoint in this book. I really loved the development he went through in this book, and I felt for him so badly. And then Katrina is a character that I wasn't too attached to in the first one, but I was intrigued by, and then this book just like gave me a great insight into who she is, and also made me feel really well for her. I think just the two of them work really well together, and I loved seeing their relationship develop. I thought that was so much fun, and I just really liked how they interacted with each other. I thought it was a lot of fun. I also thought the plot was a lot of fun, and I just had a great time reading this book. I love the setting of St. Rosetta's Academy, and I love like the side characters, this group of friends that Rahul has. I also spent time with in the first book. I think it's so much fun. I really like that. And then the only thing I didn't really like with this book, which is why I docked the star, is that towards the ending kind of like this villain gets introduced into the story, which I thought wasn't really necessary. Like, this book didn't really need that. They went into an extreme that I didn't really like, and just felt a bit jarring compared to the rest of the book, and it didn't really flow as well, and I didn't really like how it was handled either. The next book I read was Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars. Eliza Galley got 2 Galley. This one I feel a bit hard to explain because I'm still confused a little bit about the setup of it, but basically we follow this woman who like gets asked by one of her neighbors to like look after her cat, and so she does that, and the neighbor is supposed to return in a couple of days and she doesn't, and stuff happens, and basically this woman has gone missing and she kind of gets trapped in like the search for her. And then we also follow this guy who is part of like a gang, I think, I'm not entirely sure, and he is also looking for this woman, and their paths connect at certain points, not as much as I was expecting from the synopsis. And yeah, that was my trashy synopsis because I still am very confused by the beginning of this book. So yeah, main critique of this book, was so confused in the beginning. Like, generally I had a hard time grasping what was going on for like the first 25% of it, and then things started to like make sense, but still not enough that I can explain to you apparently. But yeah, I wasn't really the biggest fan of this because I wasn't really connecting to anything in the story. Like I said, the beginning was very confusing, and we have dual perspectives, and with the woman's perspective I did very easily like flow into that, and I think if this book was entirely the woman's perspective I still wouldn't have liked it much more, but I do think I would have liked it a little bit more because the guy's perspective was just too confusing and I still don't understand most of it. So yeah, but I just thought like the characters were all very flat and weren't well developed. The ending was extremely anticlimactic. I didn't really care for the mystery element in this, but I do think this was like a very interesting setting, and like the idea behind it was very interesting. Let's move on to the last book I read this month, which is Perfect Timing by Owen Nicholls, which I give 2 out of 5 stars to. There's not a gallery from Negative. It's another adult romance, and maybe that's why my adults is really increasing. But this one follows this guy and this girl. The guy is a part of a band, and then the girl is a stand-up comedian, and there is like this event where they're both performing at, and that's how they meet. And after that they have like this night together, and like right before like anything can happen between them, she finds out that he has a girlfriend. So she like goes off on him, and it's like, how dare you like almost cheat and like lie to me, like I specifically asked you if you had a girlfriend and you said no. And she storms off very madly, but this guy actually doesn't have a girlfriend. He just has social anxiety, and he has been lying to his friends about the fact that he has a girlfriend because that makes him feel like less pathetic. It's basically a story of how these two people kind of keep meeting up throughout life, like in the next couple of years, and like just the timing for them being together never being right, as she's getting more famous as a stand-up comedian and he's getting more famous in his band. And yeah, the premise of this sounded very interesting to me, and it didn't necessarily not deliver on that, but also didn't really deliver on it. I just mainly had a hard time connecting with the romance, and as it is an adult romance book, and eventually, even though there's a lot of self-exploration in this book as well, the main topic of this book is the romance, and not having a connection to that just made this like average to me, you know. But I did quite like how they kept meeting each other, and sometimes that's on purpose, sometimes that's not. And I liked how that was done. I really liked the quote the characters went through over the years, and also just like the messaging that this book eventually had of like not really forcing yourself to be ready for someone, and that it's okay to not be ready. I don't know if that makes sense, because they do end up together, spoiler alert, otherwise it's not a romance. But I don't know, I really liked it. That was it for today's wrap up. I apologize if it wasn't the best. I don't know what happened towards the end. I just had a hard time explaining my thoughts on books. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them yourselves from the books you read in the month of September, and I guess I'll see you guys next time. Good.